Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ASPRS Mentors podcast. I'm Greg Stamlish, chair of the ASPRS Early Career Professionals Council, or ECPC. We also have with us Yusuf Dora, the past chair of the ECPC, and we also have Jordan, the new vice chair of the ECPC. Jordan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jordan Hicks, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm very excited for this interview today, and I just wanted to invite everybody to stop by and see us at 1 p.m. on Monday if you're coming to Geo Week. That's going to be February 12th, and we'll be meeting at 1 p.m. So I hope to see everybody there.
Perfect, thanks for that. Just another note regarding an upcoming certification webinar we have. So we're going to bring back Mike Zoltek, and we're going to focus strictly on any questions related to certification. So if you have any questions or want to learn anything that you haven't been able to find through other resources, send those questions to either myself or Jordan, and we will make sure they get answered during that interview with Mike Zoltek. This week, our guest is Dr. Bandana Kar. Bandana, are you okay with us recording this and sharing it on social media?
Yes.
Okay, well, to get started, can you please introduce yourself and provide a brief overview of your background and experience?
Yeah, thanks, Greg, Yusuf, and Jordan for having me here. And of course, I hope to see you all in person 10 days down the road, almost. So as Greg said, I'm Bandana Kar. Currently, I'm at Department of Energy headquarter office. Before that, I was a senior scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the National Security Sciences Directorate. Before that, I was a tenured faculty at the University of Southern Mississippi in the Department of Geography and Geology. So my background is a little bit meandering. I don't have a very straightforward path. I was an academic, then I went to the national lab space. Now I am in the headquarters space. And my educational background is also a little bit meandering in the sense my undergrad was in engineering, but I have degrees in city planning and geographic information science with remote sensing. And my PhD was focused more on simulation and modeling using different data sets, including sensor data. So I have a broad bag of tricks, let's say that way. But I would go into detail as per your question, how I am here or any other questions. So I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, sure. I just have a follow-up related to your education then. Are there any skills you wish you had developed further during your academic years now? Like looking back, is there anything you feel like if you could go back to school right now, what would you focus on, or any specific skills?
That's a good question. I sincerely have not thought what I would have tried to enhance further, because the way it started out with engineering, my interest into most of my research has been in the domain space of extreme events, weather events, and disasters. And that's how I ended up having my other degrees and using remote sensing and geospatial data sets and simulation and modeling to address the disaster impacts, as well as forecasting risk and to help with humanitarian aspects, emergency response. And throughout the process, I think I learned a number of things. For instance, programming was part and parcel of my undergrad through doctoral degrees, where I used several languages, starting with Fortran to Java to C++ to Python, the whole 9 yards of stuff. But then during my academic career, also got involved in high-performance computing and cloud computing as we get more data sets. So not just having geospatial data, but as we get remote sensing satellite imagery at high resolution, a lot of data needs to be processed rapidly to get responses and damage assessment. So I ended up doing that. And the Oak Ridge side, I got into using AI and data science although we do data science and geostatistics and geocomputation more and more with the AI to expedite the process as we have more data sets coming and rapid answers are needed on the ground. What I would have liked probably to do beforehand, probably the AI aspect. I did do a neural network and all those during my doctoral degree. So it was not a surprise, but of course now the deep learners that we use versus what I was using before, given the resources we have with computing in terms of computing as well as data sets, I would have liked that before. It would have been fun rather than doing it now. But I would definitely suggest anyone who is pursuing a career in this field must learn about the basics of statistics and data science and AI, although they overlap and they are in the same under the same umbrella, as well as programming, because that would be needed because we are never using an imagery and trying to do manually. There would be no result coming out quickly if somebody wants us to give them some answers. So that would be one thing I would suggest. I'm not saying be an expert and be an expert programmer, but at least have an understanding of programming, how to do it, so that given the chance, anyone can do it by himself or herself.
Okay. So how has your career evolved from the start to where you are now? We've heard past guests talk about luck. Can you give any insight into, if I'm just got my first job and I want to kind of progress my way through my career, how can I do it? Do I just rely on luck the whole time?
It wasn't luck, actually. I won't say luck. It was an intentional chosen path for me. Like I said, when I was doing my undergrad, it was in engineering, but I'm just going back a little back to show why it is intentional. My hometown was impacted by a Category 5 hurricane, and that basically triggered my interest to pursue studies that would help me address either forecasting the risk or understanding the impact, so actions could be taken to reduce the recovery time and also build resilience. So all the educational degrees I pursued have been very intentional. Understanding city planning, how cities are designed, often determines if they are going to be resilient or not. And now we do that in the smart city context with sensors. Likewise, getting degrees in geography, specifically geographic information science. And I wanted to be in a place where I can use remote sensing and geospatial modeling and algorithm development along with hazards. So I was looking for universities. Instead of going to civil engineering program, I ended up in a geography program, especially at University of South Carolina at Columbia, because those three focus areas were conflicted based on like John Jensen. I worked with John Jensen and Susan Carter and Mike Hudson. So that allowed me to bring those expertise together along with computing. So when I started my career also as an academic, perhaps like every other individual who graduates with a doctoral degree, I wanted to be an academic to see what I can offer to the workforce side of it. So I was there, like I said, I was tenured and I was there for 9 years, and I learned a lot. I had funding, I had students, I worked with everybody. One thing I realized, being an academic is pretty good and we get to have funding and teaching and publishing, but often the research I pursued not necessarily translates to any stakeholder usage. It gets published, but not necessarily like some stakeholders are going to use it. In our case, we did work with many community organizations to ensure their inputs are in our analysis and studies, but there is no guarantee they have to do anything. It's not required. That's when I thought, okay, perhaps I should go to a national lab because they are very mission oriented, which means we have to do work that fits the administrative mission, but also there is a stakeholder aspect to it. Similar to USGS, NOAA, NASA, there is a mission component. That's how I ended up in the national lab category to work on projects, but that required stakeholders, be they policymakers or be they stakeholders like other state government agencies or FEMA, but there is a stakeholder component that will use the output that I produce through my research. So I always wanted to be in the research space where my output has some value proposition to someone, not just me doing the research because that is of interest and I can publish it. And now I'm in the headquarters side as a technology policy fellow to understand how the policy influences science. Just because I do science and there is a stakeholder, they can use it. We all know at the end of the day, policies have to be in place for something to be adopted. Being in DOE, I'm thinking about using EVs or modernization of the grid, anything. So I wanted to understand how science and policy, they interact with each other. And as a scientist, what we need to provide to the policymakers for them to come up with policies that are much more beneficial for the enhancement of the scientific discipline, but also it adds value to the communities. So that's how I have come about. So that's why I wouldn't say luck is in there. It is luck there too, because I was applying every place to get into that place. So luck played a factor for getting in, but intentionally I was targeting the place where I want to go and the type of opportunity I was exploring.
Okay. Can you kind of elaborate on the comparing and contrasting your career in regards to academics versus industry versus government versus research?
Yes, in academia, the focus is more, like I said, you do research because that interests you, but at the same time, your research has to have some connection to the department where you are. So I was in a geology program, so I was doing mostly geographic information science based, and also trying to come up with courses that are built on my research. So my research was fitting into the course materials I was developing. So the workforce development learns from research, not just theoretical aspect to it. So having that practical side of it. So that was very interesting because your workforce development and teaching and research were connected, interconnected. We need to have the workforce built on something. So I enjoyed that part aspect of it. By contrast, in the national lab side of it, which is that national lab is very similar in terms of it is in between an industry and an academic setting. So that's how you can see it's a middle ground. The focus is again on research and use of your research by someone, but more and more so we do work with educational institutions for workforce development. I had several fellows and interns who worked with me to learn about the work I was doing, but also to get an idea of the teamwork and get the experience being in a team setting. So there is that connection exists. The only part that is missing is research to workforce, but the academic educational side is missing. That was in the academic side. So in the policy space is more about translating science to policy, or basically trying to come up with solutions that are easily usable and understandable to the public who are not in my domain space. So they all have different. So if I draw a triangle, the three places allowed me to understand the research, the academic side, the workforce side, and the policy aspect in the middle of it. So how those three have to come together, because your workforce has to be built on something. It's not just random things. And everywhere I have gone to, I have used that experience to contribute to the workforce side, saying, okay, these are some of the courses where we need to focus on, not just the theoretical aspect, but rather the practical side of it. So those who are interested in any further career in applied science, then that helps.
So how does science influence policy versus policy influencing science?
That's a good question, and that was why I ended up in this space. Science does influence policy. As scientists, we come up with different answers. For instance, I'm going to go to the remote sensing world. Originally, we had only a certain set of satellite sensors. I remember when I was during my PhD, I was working on a project where I deployed a decision support system to identify satellite sensors that we can use to get imagery when an event is happening on the ground based on the location of the event, the time of the event, and the resolution, both the spatial, temporal, and the radiometric resolutions that we can get from those imagery to deal with any kind of emergency response, data damage assessment, any kind of other downstream analytics and activities. That time, the number of satellite sensors we had is way different than what we have. But that basically led us to realize, as a scientific community, we don't have access to very high resolution imagery that we will need when we are dealing with humanitarian and emergency response activities on the ground. So now we have a lot of satellite sensors that give us at sub-meter and sub-centimeter resolution, and even using drones for that purpose. So scientific community was able to tell the policy and the decision-making community where we need to invest to get those data sets that helps us with near real-time or real-time response activities. And that's how the science has influenced policy. It has taken time, of course, but as scientific community, we need to provide that. From a policy perspective, what I would say, just because we have all the imagery, there are many a chunk of the data sets we get come from the private sector side. Not necessarily we have access to them when something is happening on the ground. So we can use the public side of the wheelhouse, but the private entities have very high resolution data. So policy can play a role in those instances by setting up MOUs, memorandum of understanding, saying, hey, when certain events are happening on the ground, we would have access to those data sets without paying a ton of money, which probably is cost prohibitive to local agencies who will not be able to do that, but they do need those data sets for their own purpose. Likewise, setting standards. We are not going to produce a lot of data sets like ASPRS is responsible for producing all those standards we have for the manual, the LiDAR standards, and the quality assessment, quality assurance, and the 3D ortho standards. So the policymaking side also decides what standards we need to follow. So the products are standardized so everybody can use it rather than you and I coming up with a product based on my understanding of what standards should look like. So that's how I see the science policy community playing a role hand in hand. They go hand in hand. I have to tell them what we need and where money should be spent from a program enhancement and R&D perspective, but they also tell us what standards and regulatory guidelines we need to follow so everybody is providing something that is easily usable and interoperable rather than just having something that I'll say I generated, therefore it is good and we should go with that. So basically that aspect policy requires to set the stage for it.
All right, well, keeping to the script here, one of your questions that you told us to ask you, why the heck are you there?
Yeah, why the heck am I there? And often the question is in the DOE space, and often when we talk about geospatial science, remote sensing, geospatial intelligence, which agencies come to your mind? You tell me, or any of you tell me, which agencies generally pop in your mind that we are talking about geospatial science and remote sensing and geospatial intelligence, geoinformatics, anything. What agencies will pop to your pop?
USGS.
What else?
NGS, NOAA.
Yeah.
How often you think of NASA, Department of Defense, or Department of Energy doing anything? NASA, yes.
Yeah.
We deal with satellite sensors. What about Department of Defense?
Yeah, I guess that's a big driver in the technology, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
intelligence.
Geospatial intelligence side they do. And DOE does use them because DOE has the Office of Science that deals with basic sciences and climate modeling, where a lot of geospatial data sets and remote sensing data sets are being used for climate modeling perspective. So as well as in the national security space, DOE plays a big role because energy is central to every activity we do on a daily basis. And now we are talking, suppose we have power outage and that's the end of the discussion we have. So we rely on energy for everything. So from a national security perspective, also understanding energy access is needed. From a climate security, there is a lot of discussion how energy access is going to be secure. So DOE does use a lot of geospatial data sets, not just energy, because energy infrastructures are located at some location. So there is a where aspect to it, there is a when aspect to it, and those are the two things we capture in geospatial data sets and in remote sensing data sets, isn't it? The space and the time. And energy has that. So it allows me to educate the DOE about what we do from a geospatial perspective and the value proposition of geospatial data set, geospatial intelligence and analytics to address the energy demand, the supply at a specific location at a specific time under different event conditions. So I'm here because my interest is energy infrastructure resilience, but also I bring that expertise of dealing with geospatial data sets to address, okay, it is not something that happens in the ether space. It has a location and time component attached. And what are the different data sets that we can use to address the space-time relationship in the context of other energy-related analytics and modeling that is going on. So DOE does use these data sets, but often we don't think about it. So I feel very, that sense, I feel lucky being here to tell them, okay, this is what I bring to the table. And I can talk about it with them about the value proposition of the different data sets and how they can be used.
Okay. So I guess taking your personal interest and your origin of natural disaster that kind of guided you through your career path, assuming you're an undergrad, but knowing everything you know now, and but you haven't picked your major yet, where do you see the most opportunity for those people in the future, those people searching out their a niche in the market?
That's a good question. If they are, okay, doesn't matter which, if you are in the computing world, then you are definitely going, majority would go into the AI space. But they need to understand in the AI space, we rely a lot on computer vision. Computer vision means we are inherently going back to the remote sensing world, using imagery data sets for different things. So they need to have an understanding of not just using AI and computer vision, but also understanding the remote sensing world. Just because you have access to an imagery does not mean we are going to run any kind of algorithm, a deep learning algorithm for classification or prediction, unless we address some of the issues we get to have with remote sensing images that those of us who take those courses, we know, like doing atmospheric corrections, radiometric corrections, so on and so forth. They need to understand that part. So it would be good for them to at least sit in some of those courses so they have a good understanding of the data itself. It's not just an imagery that we have access to. If someone is on the geospatial side, photogrammetry side, remote sensing, that's a broad area. I would strongly urge them to know about the geospatial intelligence that Jordan was pointing, because GeoInt, although is very similar to most of the courses, but geospatial intelligence is basically deriving information from geospatial data sets, which means the students need to have an understanding of all the geospatial data sets, that different models that they can use. I'm not saying be an expert in everything, but they need to have an understanding of the pipeline, as well as how that pipeline can be created in any different conditions, so it is replicated each time. You are not going back and trying to tweak it all the time. So they should take some of the courses. I'm going with those two because those are the two areas where I have. But I also would suggest if they can take some of the certification courses that ASPRS offers, it allows them to learn a lot and pushes them to know about some of the different concepts that generally they won't know unless they have taken courses. So the certification program is a good place to get their expertise as well by knowing about it. Which other discipline I can go? Anyone who is in the civil and industrial engineering, nowadays civil engineering does a lot of courses. They do offer a lot of courses in the remote sensing and photogrammetry and image processing world as well. So because more and more students from that discipline are getting involved in this space, mostly because of the use of the data sets that we produce, and they all have a need to know about the data set, so they are doing it. But I would suggest if their interest is in any of the spaces where they are going to use imagery of any kind, they should take at least a bare minimum of remote sensing courses and aerial photo interpretation kind of courses, so they know understand what an imagery means, not just a picture. There is a value to it, and each pixel contains some information. So they should take at least the bare minimum basic course. And beyond that, they can go any direction they want to pursue.
Perfect. I like the suggestion for the ASPRS workshop materials as well. I've learned a ton from those resources that, you know, a 3-hour workshop can go a long way, or a 4-hour workshop can go a long way.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on maybe past and current roles and future role within ASPRS?
Yes. So I will be the president of ASPRS like 10 days down the road in Geo Week. And I was looking back at the history of the presidents for ASPRS since it started in 1935. So it's almost 90 years at this point. I'm not the only female one, but I definitely am the only female president from Indian origin or Indian origin, if I look at the list, which makes me honored and humbled to be among those others who are very qualified people who have been in this role. I have been part of ASPRS since I was a master's student. I was asked by my advisor, hey, you are doing stuff using imagery, then you should be part of this society so you will get to know where the remote sensing world is going. And that's how I started as a student member, and I continued to be a member of the society. Later on, I stepped into other leadership roles, like being the vice chair and the chair. Now they are called assistant director and director of the GIScience division. And then I was the chair and vice chair for the technical division director council. Then I got elected as the vice president, and so on and so forth. So anyone who wants to be involved in the society in whatever capacity, depending upon your commitments, should start out as a member. If you are a student, be a student member. There is a lot of value proposition, even when you are not paying a hefty fee. There is a lot to learn. You can network with several people. They come from academia, industry, national labs, nonprofits who are part of the society, so they can interact and network with them and ask for mentoring advices, any suggestions and guidance. They can take the courses, like you said, the workshops and certification. And then that is a good starting point. If they want to pursue any leadership role, then perhaps they can continue with the Student Advisory Council or the ECPC, like you, Jordan, and Yusuf have been. And that also allows them to step into some leadership role. Leadership does not mean that you are going to take the burden of managing the society. Leadership means you are actively identifying certain things that would help the portion of the society, like the early career side. You are trying to identify how the early career members can connect with other members for potential guidance, suggestions, networking, any of the value propositions. So I would strongly suggest to start there and be a member at least, to see what the value this society has to offer. The other thing I would point out, ASPRS is unique as compared to other societies, mostly because I don't know how many of the attendees are in other professional societies. There is the AGU, the Geophysical Union. There is also the association, the American Association of Geographers, the American Society of Civil Engineers. The ones I am part of, I know of, they all have remote sensing component. There is one thing that is unique about ASPRS is it's not just the remote sensing component or the application of it, but also the photogrammetry aspect of it. We do need photogrammetry when we use any kind of imagery to derive the information from those imagery. And I haven't seen any of the other societies having photogrammetry as a main component, and that makes this society unique in itself. So I would urge students to be part of this society, because they do have a value proposition of learning about geodesy, photogrammetry, the standards that I mentioned at the beginning. ASPRS is responsible for setting forth different standards. And also we are a member of the FGDC, the Geographical Data Committee, where we provide information for standards. So it would be a good place for them to learn about many things.
So how has it helped you getting involved? I know you said your professor there kind of said you should get into this. How has it helped you over the years?
When I started, like I said, I was a student member and I basically attended all the events, mostly at the beginning to know about the society, but also attending all the sessions in the annual conferences to broaden my horizon in the remote sensing and photogrammetry space. The different application areas when we use imagery, the different areas where the algorithmic development is happening. So attending those sessions was for me to educate myself the different things I can do with remote sensing. And later on, I started connecting with senior members, for instance, like Karen, who is the managing director at this point, Margaret Madden, she was a previous president, then Jordan. So basically getting connected with senior researchers who I always looked up on as a student, saying, okay, wow, they do all these things. So that allowed me to get connected to them and get their insight into my career, what I was pursuing, but also oftentimes I will reach out to them just to get guidance and suggestions, sometimes to just get recommendation letters because I'm in the research community. They know me, so they know about my research. So it has helped me in any ways in building new partnerships, new collaborations, just building professional acquaintances and friendships while I'm learning along the way. And so I strongly suggest I'm not trying to sell just because I'm going to step into the presidential role. This society has helped me. Like I said, I have been a member for almost 2 decades now. Since I was a student and I was new in this country, knew nothing about different professional societies. ASPRS was the first one I joined before I joined other societies. And so I have gained a lot and I have learned a lot. I have built new friendships, new collaborations. So it has been a good experience all the way for me. And I hope that would be the case with everyone else who is willing and interested to be part of the society.
Yeah, I've just to add my 2 cents onto that. I've been a member of a few professional organizations, and this one has given back the most. And if you're a lifelong learner or you have an interest in lifelong learning, that's where I'm at. So I've definitely got a lot back just out of, I mean, if you take the personal relationships and leadership opportunities and everything else out of it, just for that, it's been pretty amazing. So I just wanted to open up the floor. So far you've passed the test. You've got every question right. But I wanted to open it up to see if anybody else has any questions that we can ask you. And I put a note, if you don't feel comfortable asking live, I can type it in the chat and I can ask.
I have a question. Thank you, Dr.
Yes.
Bandana, for this inspiring, really, story. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be, will value your insights. My question to you and people like me who have PhDs. So when did you know that you are done with the academic and the tenure, especially that you have put all the effort, like being tenure, this means like, you're already full speed, full hard going, and then switching to the industry. How did you realize that, or what happened? I don't know. So we would like to hear more about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I won't say I totally cut my ties with academia. I won't say that because I still have a joint faculty position and I still
I see.
am in, yes, I still advise at least one doctoral student at this point. I'm in his committee and I continue to advise few doctoral and master's students. And oftentimes those who came to do an internship with me at the lab, I ended up serving in their committees. Because they somehow their research aligned with what I had to offer, and I ended up. But to answer your question, when I was already tenured, yes, that's the linear path. I could have taken to gone on to become a professor, and that was perfectly fine. But at the end of my, a couple of years after my tenure, the projects I had, we requested policy changes, and some policy changes happened based on the work I was doing. We presented that to National Academy of Sciences, and some changes happened. But that's when I realized the research I do, the funding I receive is taxpayers' money. But the outputs I generate not necessarily are going back to the taxpayers to be used in some manner. That's what made me realize, okay, perhaps I should look for a place where I can produce the outputs that have a value proposition to someone. And I ended up in the national lab. Like I said, it's in between industry and academia, in the sense it is very fast-paced like industry, but in academic setting where your research has to have some usage to someone. And often, like my funding came from NASA and DOE. So one of the NASA projects that I started, it just is wrapping up. The outputs we produced is actively used by the United Nations as well as the World Food Program now. And that's the goal we had. Like, we have to produce, it has to be used by someone. The same with the Department of Energy products. They are used by the Department of Energy for their decision-making process during extreme events. So my pivotal point was learning that my research does not have to be just publication, but it can have a value proposition to someone else. And I started looking for alternatives.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yusuf. Any other questions from the live attendees? I guess just put your hand up if you have one. In the meantime, if anybody wants to reach out to ask more questions, what's the best way to get in touch?
They can always email me. You have my Gmail address. They can always email me on that one if they want any one-on-one conversation. I would also be at Geo Week if they are attending. I would be happy to interact with them, connect with them when I'm there in person. But please share my Gmail account. They can always reach me on my LinkedIn too. They can post a message if that's the way they would like to. So all of those would apply.
Perfect. Thank you. Will you be at the ECPC little breakout room at Geo Week?
I'll try. I just have to see if we have anything during that time. Hopefully not. I just have to go through the agenda. I haven't done that. I know only parts of all the agenda. I need to read through the whole program, but I'll be there.
Okay.
I'll make sure to stop by.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. I think we had a lot of unique insight from your perspective that is very valuable to us that attended live and to future watchers of this recording. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. And again, let me know if I can be of any assistance.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.